Good evening, everyone. My name is Damir, and I suffer from a horrible gaming addiction, as much as everybody here. And this has been a secret plan of mine, because as a sociologist and an art historian, this is my only chance to lecture at the FER University. So let's see how it goes. So today we're talking about storytelling in gaming. Who here is actually in the business of gaming? And who wants to be in the business of gaming? Can I see some hands? Okay. Nice. Excellent. Cool. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience and some of the tropes and methods that we use. Some of you in the industry already know this. Hopefully for some of you this is completely new and fun. So let's start. Before we go into the thing, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Damir First. I am from Croatia. I spent quite a long time living in China and Japan, 12 years. And I have been, for the last 8 years, doing extended reality business. I have also done some games which have millions of daily users. I have started an AR startup in 2021, in which I helped as a co-founder to raise $7 million. And altogether we raised $20 million. And I am now doing kind of narrative design and various topics that happen at the intersection of games, of extended reality experiences, and everything related to spatial computing. So I also been playing D&D for a long time. So if you want to play D&D, let me know. I'm going to be around for the next 3 days here. Let's talk a little bit about what storytelling is. So everybody here, I feel, is already familiar in some way with the idea of storytelling. And something that we want to talk about today is not directly related to this, but it's important that we set some ground rules and some scaffolding. And basically, storytelling is something that has defined us as a species. Humans are storytelling machines. We find causality in everything that we do. And also, stories are a very powerful medium of making people do things together. Memetics, something that Richard Dawkins talks about in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, is something that started as a counterpoint to the gene. The meme is a viral idea which wants to spread in the same way the gene wants to spread through physical space. But memes spread through conscious minds. And everything that we do... Huh? Sorry?
You want a microphone?
Do I need one? Can you guys hear me? Okay, then I'm gonna... If I talk like this, is this okay? All right, I'm going to project my voice with confidence. Religious parties, political parties, cultures, all are based on stories. The world is built on stories. Stories have significance in multiple ways for how humans organize. They invoke awe and wonder about the world, which is a metaphysical function of stories. They explain the natural order, which is a cosmological function. They demonstrate societal norms and ways to behave, which is a sociological function. And finally, they define acceptable behaviors and guide how to live a happy life, which is a pedagogical function. How to become a great storyteller. This is a photo taken in Zagreb, which is a storytelling school in Amsterdam, in Holland. And this is one of the founders who created a place where people tell stories. It's called Zagreb, the House of Stories, and it is a strictly storytelling venue. So you go there and you tell stories. Storytelling is a form of performative art which has been slowly gaining traction, and is based on some very old, very traditional ways of oral storytelling, but also there's a whole new slew of things like psychodrama, using storytelling as therapy. And if you want to talk about that, let me know, and we can chat about this later. By the way, I have left 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, so hopefully we get there in time. The thing about storytelling that's really important is that storytelling, unlike, let's say, theater, engages the audience in a different way. When an actor performs a text, he doesn't really care about the environment he's in, traditionally. However, a storyteller, he engages with the audience and he wants the participation of the audience. Do you understand? Yes. Excellent. So this builds trust because if I'm telling you a story, I am here for you as much as you are here to hear the story. So we create a sense of connection. This is very important. Why does this matter? Because even in business, we use storytelling quite a lot. Steve Jobs was a massive, massive storyteller. And instead of talking about tech, bullet points about the speed of the processor, about how great the technology is, he talked about stuff which we relate to. The first iPod was 1,000 songs in your pocket. It didn't talk about how many megabytes the hard drive was. And they still keep doing it. They say the retina display. They don't say a high-def 4K display. The reason why this is important is because we stimulate engagement in the same way when we tell a business story than we do, as we do in a story, which is a more traditional type of connecting each other. And this is exactly the same thing we do in game design. Let's talk about narrative structures. Raise your hand if you know what this is. Joseph Campbell would be proud. So the hero's journey is one of those things that kind of seeped into pop culture. And Joseph Campbell, in the 1960s, he does research about basically comparative mythology. He does it by himself. He's self-taught. And he talks about the monomyth, a single structure that we can use in different that we can use to basically pull every story through certain story beats. Now, the hero's journey is also something that most makers of creative things know. So if you feel like a structure of a movie is familiar, even though it's with completely new characters, even though it's with completely new set of world-building settings, it's because you know the alphabet. You anticipate story beats. And this is why genre cinema is always something that you actually know what to expect from. So when you go see a comedy, you know you want to see a comedy. So a lot of it is based on anticipation and expectation. Give me 3 examples of the hero's journey. Okay, yes, excellent. Buffy, okay. Sorry? Yes, okay, excellent. How about the big ones? The Odyssey, exactly, right. What about from pop culture? Like, what's the biggest like hero's journey story that happened in the 1970s? Star Wars. Star Wars is the blueprint of the hero's journey because many people don't know, but George Lucas took the monomyth and he created the story beats in Star Wars according to this. Wizard of Oz, The Matrix, Harry Potter, they all follow the same pattern. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here's another one which you might not know about, Save the Cat. Who knows about Save the Cat? Excellent, okay, so people working in the industry. So Blake Snyder is a screenwriter, was a screenwriter, who created something called Save the Cat. This is a beat per beat, like minute by minute in a feature film structure that you use. So has anybody here seen Lethal Weapon? Yes. Okay, right, so what? Yes? I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of young people here. So in Lethal Weapon, there's that famous line, you know, I only have 3 days until retirement, and then the guy dies, right, in the first beat of the movie. The reason why it's called Save the Cat is because what we want to do is we want to create a moment of empathy and connection with the protagonist of the story, with the main character of the story. So what does he do in the first minute of the movie? He saves the cat. He saves the cat from a tree or does something similarly empathetic so that we know that he is the hero. And as you can see here, we have basically by percentage of where the story needs to go, what happens. So we have an opening image, we have a theme of the movie that's stated. So let's take Harry Potter, for example. Harry Potter is an orphan who is living under the stairs with a family that hates him, and then all of a sudden, something happens. A letter arrives from a school, a magic school, and we have the catalyst, something that happens. Now, I'm not going to break it down more, but again, this is something, if you have questions, we can talk about it at the end. The reason why I wanted to mention this is because it's used and abused and over-abused in the creative industry. It almost feels like a smash, super blockbuster cannot be done without using the structure. And this is why on Marvel movies you will see 4 writers getting credit for a story that feels like could be written by anybody who watched any of the 735 Marvel movies so far. Let's talk about gaming. This is why you guys are here. So, first of all, what does a game designer do? So I like the definition that comes from the Japanese language, where they call a game designer a planner. So this is a person who creates what the game is about at every level of granularity. The game designer is the director of the game, I would say. Unlike a lot of other things that happen in the entertainment industry, you can have a game designer without somebody developing a story. So Tetris has no story. Super Mario has a semblance of a story, but it's not really important, because when we talk about game design, we talk about how does it feel to play the game from second to second. So, for instance, I'm not a great fan of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time, because when I started reading it, people said, when you get to the 7th book, it really gets good. And I was like, 7,000 pages in, seriously, I cannot. So the reason why it's really important to talk about game design is because we can't expect to have the same dynamic which happens in a game that does in a story. So what the game designer really does, he iterates. He creates a structure which is something that we can use for not only designing games, but multiple other things. So the process of game design is iterative, meaning that we need to go through multiple cycles of design, which is when we think about an idea, a prototype, where we put it into being. Then we play test it to see what doesn't work, and then we analyze and reflect on what doesn't work. And we repeat the cycle again and again and again until something gets fun. Making fun things is extremely difficult. I would kind of paint it as, imagine if you want to build an airplane and you don't know how to lift off and fly into the air. Well, every time you make a new game, you have to do that all over again, because what worked for the last one doesn't work for this one. So, playtesting is the best way to tell if a game is good or not. Anybody here in playtesting or QA? You know what I'm talking about, right? Does this make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's keep going. So today I'm going to talk to you about like one specific framework, which is probably the only formative framework in game design so far. And it's called the MDA framework: mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. The reason why we want to talk about this is because you will kind of understand from here what does it take to make a game fun, and what are the things that we can influence when we design games. We can only influence one thing. We can only influence the dynamics. The dynamics is, what are the rules? Like, how does the game work? What happens when you shoot a gun? What happens when you jump? How high do you jump? Like, what kind of things can you do in the air? If we're talking about the game with an extended narrative structure, we're talking about what do your choices mean when you try out different options. And the only thing that we can do is we can set up the rules and the systems, and then we go to the dynamics part, which is how does the game play? What does that mean? It means that you need to have an experiential experiential way of looking at what's happening, you need to look at the actions that the player needs to take. You need to look at what happens when you run around, what happens when you level up, what happens when you bake cakes, when you control an army, when you put cards on the table. All of these things are dynamics. And finally, aesthetics, which in my personal opinion is a little bit of a clumsy term, because we're not talking about what does the game look like. We're talking about how does the game feel. And the underlying emotive reasoning is the most important thing here, right? Like, why do you play the game? Like, do you play the game because you want to experience the story? Do you play it because you enjoy beating your opponents? Do you play the game because you feel like you want to collect everything? These are the things that we try to talk about. And the MDA framework is basically three things. Mechanics is code, dynamics is actions, and aesthetics is feelings. If you try to design a game, you go from what do I want the person to feel when they play? Then you backtrack into what do they do? And then finally, how does that work? This is actually a really great framework for any kind of storytelling experience. You can talk about this when you're designing any kind of thing which involves people getting excited, scared, etc. So, there's a very famous article called The Door Problem. And Liz England, who wrote this article, this is much longer than it is. It's like this. What does a game designer do? You make a door in a game. How does it work? What is the door for? Can you open the door? Are there some doors you cannot open? Are there doors that you can only open in certain conditions? Can everybody open the door? What happens when you open a door? Who goes through the door? How many players can go through the doors in the same time? Are the doors that you can open green and the doors that you cannot red? These are all questions we need to ask. And then extensively, when we take that into the entire idea of what a game company does, then we have roles, not just like the game designer, but also a creative director or an artist who says, an artist says, I made these 4 beautiful doors. The creative director says, I'm going to pick this door. Then the Q&A guys say, okay, I opened every door. I tried to open it from both sides. These ones work. These ones don't work. People who are doing marketing can say, guys, an amazing update is coming. You cannot believe the doors we have in our game. Stay updated. So this is a really, really interesting and simple way to think about what a certain person does in a gaming company. So, game mechanics, as we said, can influence player behavior and emotions. Have you played Overcooked? Yes. Okay, do you like it? Yes. Do you like people you play it with after you play it? Yeah. So, if you change the settings in a game, you change the vibe. Overcooked has this really kind of chill vibe, hanging out with friends. You look at the characters and you think this is a really chill kind of like Pokemon type game, a cozy game, something like Stardew Valley. And then you start thinking about who's going to do the dishes. No one wants to do the dishes. Everybody wants to bring in orders. Who takes the plate and brings it back? Why is it on fire already? Why can't we get along? I told you to do this. Basically, the idea behind something like Overcooked was to think about how do the people feel when they play. And you give them a very simple set of rules, but you create a massive amount of engagement. I have 3 stepsons. They are 9, 12, and 14. And they are the most horrible people in the world when we play this game. But we end up having a lot of fun. So, movement speed, forced co-op, they push players to constantly communicate. More of the game is happening not on the screen, but in the room. Something interesting to think about when you create a gaming experience, a video game experience. Okay, so how do video games use narrative and action to engage players? Well, first thing we need to think about is if we're designing games is fun versus fulfillment, and what are some of the choices there? This is something that I took from a very, very cool course, which is called the Complete Course to Game Design, and you can find it on Coursera or edX. It's completely free. I highly recommend it. If this is something you like, this is a really cool course with 20 lessons to look at. So basically, when we make a game, the thing we need to talk about first is it fun? What's the core gameplay loop? What happens from second to second? In Mario, you move from left side to right, you jump on certain things, you can smash certain things, and you try to get from the beginning on the left to the end at the right. Now, if you didn't have anything fun to do while you're moving through the obstacles, it wouldn't be something that you want to finish. Now, whatever you try to do, you try to make it fun inherently. So you build the toy first. So Shigeru Miyamoto, who is one of the most epic game designers in Nintendo, he basically, when they made Super Mario Galaxy, for months and months, the only thing they were tweaking was how does Mario move? What happens when he falls? When can he slide? How much can he jump? In a completely gray box. So there was no world, there was no enemies, nothing. So the thing about fun fulfillment is it's all about goals and objectives. So how do you win? So you build stuff. Okay, so here I would love some participation from you. So give me a couple of other examples of games when I tell you what the fun fulfillment, goal objective is. So building games like Catan. Give me another one. It doesn't have to be a board game, it can be a video game. Maya. Sorry?
Civilization.
Civilization, yes, it's a building game. Excellent. Something like Capture. We have chess. What else? Checkers. Yes. Pokemon would be collect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Go, for instance. Right? This is another capture game where you're trying to, like, when people really get into chess, they realize chess is not about taking pawns and figures. Yeah, pieces, yeah. So it's not about taking pieces, it's about taking space. Like when you start thinking about chess strategically, not tactically, the difference between strategy and tactics being strategy is the overall plan that you have, and tactics is how you move step by step from each step to the next. So when we think about chess strategically, we try to capture most of the board or a certain part of the board and control it. Then a game of control, something like Risk, right? The more space you own, the better you are. Give me another control game.
Still civilization.
Multiple games can have the same game can have multiple goals and objectives. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. What else? Give me another. Huh? Twilight Imperium, the game which takes 75 hours to play, right? Absolutely. Okay, then we have Collect, something like Rummy, something like Pokemon, something like collectible card games, Magic, right? Like in Magic, it's really important to have the good cards. Then we have, you need to solve something like Cluedo. Give me another example of something to solve. Very good. Anything else? Sudoku? Yes. Escape rooms. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Right. So then we have to align things. Tetris. Give me another one. Candy Crush. Tic-tac-toe. Yes.
That Suica game that was like trending a year ago. You know, the one with like the watermelon.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's the same type of mechanics, right? Then we have Race, Chase, Escape, something like Mario Kart. Need for Speed games. Anything else comes to mind? Yes. So the thing about this is it's very hard to find a single type of objective game. It's quite rare. And especially today, everybody in the gaming industry is trying to combine interesting genres in ways that haven't been done before. So for instance, Slay the Spire. It's a roguelite collectible game, but you need to be flexible, and every single time try to play openly until you figure out what your deck is about. Who played Slay the Spire? Who played Slay the Spire more than 100 hours? You don't want to know how long I played it. Okay, and then finally we have an elimination game like Jenga. Give me another elimination game. Okay. Twister. Yeah? Excellent. All right, cool. So let's talk about how, now let's go into a little bit about like how can we use level design to create interesting situations. So how did Nintendo solve the Zelda problem, the open world problem? So basically what happened when Nintendo created Breath of the Wild, they had a problem because they needed to balance the freedom you have in an open world with the story progression. And what they did was, first they placed all the events next to the, who played Zelda? Who played the Breath of the Wild? Okay. I'm a little bit surprised that more of you haven't played it. I find Zelda to be probably the best open game that there is. And sorry? Huh? Okay, well, yeah. I mean, they make good games though. They make really good games. Did you know that Nintendo was originally a company that creates collectible cards in the 19th century? There you go. Excellent. So basically, what Nintendo did is they realized that if they place events along the main story points, players feel stuck. So what did they do? They created to lure players with this triangle rule. So what they did was they created points of interest visually that you can get to wherever you look at something on the map. If you look at anything on the map, there's always a triangle you can go to, and you can go either over it or around it. So basically, these landmarks and points of interest are always placed somewhere just beyond where you are. And these triangles, they guide the player's eye, and they also block the whatever is behind it, so you need to go there, and you don't feel like you have too much to do. So here is another interesting part. So for instance, we have a tower which is behind a hill. But as you go there, we're climbing and climbing and climbing, and bam, the tower is there. And wherever you go over an obstacle, so here it's a little bit clipped, but you can see a shrine over there. And this is something that took a really, really long time to do right. The way that they did it was they had heat maps of all the players and where they're at, and then kind of think about it and juggle it. And this is why I say making a game that's fun is like building an airplane for the first time, every time. So let's talk a little bit about world building for games. And what other lessons can we take what can we take to other immersive spaces? So for instance, environments can effectively tell a story. So here's a part of Uncharted 4. Basically, environmental storytelling is when you place breadcrumbs and have the players come in and figure out exactly what happened, and it gives them a sense of achievement. So in this case, we have a piano, which is in the middle of a room. And then as you progress through the level, you don't get there immediately. Later, you get to the next floor, to the upper floor, and you realize, okay, this is what happened. I get this world. It's a very powerful feeling. So this is what designers do. They use world building to evoke not only a sense of achievement, but also a sense of emotion through color and shape and so on. Another beautiful game that I love very much, Journey. Have you played Journey? Okay, play Journey, okay? This is your homework. Like, play it, you won't be disappointed. So the way that, for instance, that game company and Genoa Chen, who designed Journey, does it is they use colors. So you can distinctly feel different types of feelings when you go through parts of the level. So for instance, here you're falling down into a dark hole, which makes you feel a bit closed off, a bit claustrophobic, it's a bit scary. And then as you go up and up and up, the game is called Journey because in the very first, there is no words in this game. There is not even a single word. But the moment you spawn, you see in front of you a top of a mountain. Intuitively, you understand this is your journey. So it's a beautiful, skillful, masterful way of telling stories. So, all right, so here are some tools that I will jump through, and You can get in touch with me, and then I can share the presentation with you afterwards. So let's skip this. Now, how do we apply some of these rules to different virtual environments? Now, this is like a very interesting and new field to be in. So for instance, let's take a game, for example. Let's talk about some storytelling principles that we can use in a game. Have you played Helldivers? Okay, so Helldivers is a very, very fun satire game, which is based off mostly Starship Troopers, which is a movie by Paul Verhoeven. Before that, a book by Robert Heinlein about a militaristic system which rewards you for being in the army by giving you the right to vote. And democracy is a right that you earn, not by birth, but by becoming a soldier, like serving. Otherwise, you're called a civilian. The idea of this game is really, really fun. So basically, you romp around like planets, and you kill either disgusting bugs or communist robots who are trying to take our liberty and freedom. And the game was a massive success, partially due to its narrative structure, but also because, by the way, this video here is a fan-based video, which is a piece of news reporting about casualties on a planet that Super Earth, that's what the nation is called, Super Earth lost. So this is fan-based material, which kind of like goes into this overly dramatic storytelling structure about casualties of war, completely fan-based, completely emergent. Emergent gameplay and emergent storylines are something that happens without the intention of the designers. So basically, the fun thing here is that because the game has over like 500,000 players, they have a game master, somebody who actually tweaks the settings. So as if the humans are winning, if the players are winning, he piles up more enemies somewhere. And there is this person called Joel who is controlling this world. And if you look at the map has two types of enemies, but it also has 2 blank spots on the map, which means that there's probably going to be two more races coming in at some point. People are very excited about this. This is one of the highest grade games ever, and people are actually buying like a collector level edition of the game to boost the developers. So the game is around 30 euros. But there is like a collector's edition for 60, 70 euros, and people are actually hundreds of thousands of people are buying this edition to like support the team making it. So gaming can also be not toxic. All you need to do is like kill communist robots, I guess. So this is an example of a game. Another thing that is very interesting happening in the last couple of years is these virtual events which are happening in what we could call social metaverses, like Fortnite. So Fortnite, one of the biggest games, like Epic is the most profitable gaming company in the history of the world, and they are making something which is like a game but not a game. So in 2019, there was a concert done by Marshmello, a big name in music. He put on a mocap suit and actually performed live for, as we can see here, more than 10 million people. They were not all on the same server. They were not all in the same space. The servers, like, this is still a massive bottleneck in multiplayer gaming. There were basically around 50, 60 people per instance of the concert, but concurrently there was more than 10 million of them. So this is a very interesting concept and something that I think is going to grow in the future. Another thing that we can use these design principles for is for art exhibitions. So this is a art exhibition in Decentraland, a social metaverse, which has been done by 34 artists who have been commissioned to create artworks, instances of virtual interactive pieces of art that you can walk into. And this is a completely different way of looking at how immersive experiences can be basically tweaked into something which is like a game but not a game. Because for a lot of people looking at this, they would say, oh, this is a game. But it's not a game. It's actually a space. It's a completely different container for people to spend time with together. And then finally here, we're talking about transmedia. So transmedia storytelling. The Last of Us video game was a massive success by Naughty Dog, and then recently it was turned into a massive show. And as you can see here, over 10 million copies of the game has been sold worldwide, and when the HBO show premiered, it had almost 5 million people watching it. It also received 8 Emmy wins. This is a first. So transmedia storytelling is when we take instances of the same story and we seed it through different media types. So if you're following a social account where you're following something happening in the game, this is transmedia. If you're watching a TV show based on a video game, which is kind of the same but not exactly the same, this is transmedia. And here is a humble contribution by yours truly. So in the startup that I was in, we created something which I'm very proud of, especially in this group of people. So we were building a way to create social shared AR. So we created an infrastructure in which multiple people could share into the same augmented reality space. To understand the problem better, why this is difficult is when you have an AR experience and you scan in and you have an asset like a dragon or a spaceship which is in front of you, a digital object in material space, every single person who scans a QR code or goes to a website, what they do is they take an individual, they have an individual experience, meaning that they download the 3D asset onto their phone and they see it. And even though multiple people can see it in the same place, what happens is it's not the same object. It's an individual object for every single device because it downloaded it from the same server. Now what we did is we created a way to create a genuine shared experience where multiple people, when they scan in, they can see the same digital object in the same place. And then to think about some of the ways in which we can promote this idea was to talk to science fiction authors and get them to write a story about the future of AR. Has anybody here read Alastair Reynolds? 0, okay. It's really good. It's very dark. It's quite cool. So Alastair Reynolds is a Welsh author who worked for the European Space Agency as a scientist and then became a writer. He recently signed a massive book deal, 10 books for like £1 million. So he wrote this story about like a dark, kind of like a dark future of humans and alien races. And what we did was we asked him, could you write a story for us about the future of AR? And he did. And what we did is we took that story, we made multiple instances. We made a podcast, we made a animated short, kind of like an audiobook of around 30 minutes with our own assets, and we built kind of like, as you can see, it was really cool when it came out because it was AI. Now you can kind of see it's AI. So I still think it's pretty cool. But basically what we did is we took that narrative from sci-fi to kind of boost our own narrative in the startup world, in the deep tech world, to talk about things like privacy, who owns the data that you see through your screen. These are very big concerns by massive corporations which are actually seeing the insides of our bedrooms, seeing what we see through our phones. And the person writing this story found it compelling enough to actually work with us on this. And I believe this is it. Thank you very much. So we have 10 minutes. Do you have any questions, comments, criticisms? Please.
You have mentioned that in the Hellbinders, the community has come in and, let's say, continued the world building of the game. Is that in a way could be a problem? Do you think that the developers and writers who have done enough to write good world building or enough of world building that the community has to step in?
I don't think it's about the community stepping in to fill the gap that the designers left. I think it's about the community feeling like they are a part of building the story. This is a massive difference. This is the difference between having a dungeon master who like needs you to go into the city and a dungeon master who lets you run around and then places story elements wherever you end up. So no, I don't think it's a problem. I actually think it's a genius move because nothing works these days as player engagement. Like basically, if you don't have live ops for your game, it will probably not, like it will probably fail. The only types of studios that can allow themselves to create experiences which are narrated and directed are massive AAA studios like Santa Monica and you know, anything by Sony, and you know, the really big ones like Ubisoft, whose games have been sucked for a really long time. Okay.
I have a sort of a theoretical question. I wrote my thesis on lunar ethology.
Congrats.
Its comparison with some forms of literature which kind of predate this concept. But what I noticed when I was doing research for this was that academic work done by scholars who are usually from some form of literature major, like I was at the time, and work done by game developers, there's a problem with the language because there's a lot of concepts that have 3 to 4 different definitions. Because I don't think there's a lot of communication between the development world and the theoretical world. And I personally believe that it's because we don't put as much value in video games as we should when it comes to storytelling. And it should be put there. But I was wondering, do you know of any ways of breaching this gap, or any people who are doing this currently?
Okay, so first of all, a very interesting question, and as a previous scholar myself who kind of moved into the private industry and tried to build something from scratch, like I absolutely understand the frustration that's there. But there's, like, science and business are for 2 different things, right? Like, one is to study, observe, look at things, the other one is to make money. Because, like, you know, we can talk about how cool it is to have a video game company, but if you don't have retention methods, if you don't understand how to keep the player, you will not earn money. Like 7 out of 10 studios fail. Like it's a really difficult business. The other thing that I wanted to say, I see you. The other thing that I wanted to say is that unlike a game, a story has completely different rules. So basically in a story, you can do pacing through story beats. In a game, you can't. Like in a game, you do pacing through events. And then you have to think about what are you designing for? Are you designing for the events to happen in a certain type of speed? Or, for instance, if you have in a story you have a fight scene, a battle scene, right? And it can last for a couple of pages, right? But in a game, that might be half of the game. So it's a completely different way to think about, like, what are you designing for? Like, what does the experience entail? Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. All right. Yes.
How should developers handle differing expectations within that community? For example, when you have a large player base and they expect different things for a bunch of different things from the game. For example, like MMO games tend to become an everything game because they try to cater to everyone.
Okay, that's a really good question. And it's a very sound business answer. Who's your target audience? When you create a value proposition in business, which is a product or a service, what you're looking for is a person who wants to buy it. Somebody who you make happy by, you make them so happy they want to give you money for it, right? So basically, what you do is, first of all, you create a spec, you look at who your target audience is, and then you create something called an ideal customer persona, which is a, you know, like, my target audience for this lecture, my ideal customer persona, is a person in their mid-20s looking to get into gaming with an encyclopedic knowledge of how stories work games that they've played, and a very strong sense of ownership of that information. This is what I made this lecture for. So hopefully you recognize yourself in some of this. No. We have 5 more minutes. Yes? 5 more? Or should we finish? Okay.
You spoke about using storytelling as therapy, so I was wondering about that.
Have you played D&D? Okay. So I'll give you a very personal story. I played a character for 14 months who was a necromancer with autism, autistic necromancer, because the way that I explained like a high intelligence score and a very low charisma score was this person doesn't understand social interactions. And with all due respect, if somebody's on the spectrum or neurodivergent here, like I try to play it with the sense of this person is a part of me, but it's not me. So when this person reacts, this character reacts, they react from a different place than I do. And through learning about my character, through many months of weekly plays, I found myself reacting in ways that surprised me. So anybody here writing, doing creative work, when you get to that place where something happens, the muse talks to you, this is the moment, right? If you can employ that moment for a therapeutic, for a moment of healing, like that's magic. That is actual magic. That is like I bend through my will reality, right? So I think it's a massive thing. And I think finally the mainstream caught on through shows like Critical Role, through Brandon Lee Mulligan's Dimension 20, through all of these things which kind of are now celebrated as opposed to being kind of like nerdy, awkward things which happened to me when I was your age. Huh.
So you mentioned in passing that currently only AAA studios can afford to create a game that is purely like railroaded, a single plot line that you are forced to traverse. Do you think this is just a product of the times? Or do you think this is something that is going to be permanent? Because historically, I see that more linear games were more common than today. Perhaps because of software limitations, but is there a social aspect to that? Do you think?
So this is an interesting question, and it would take me a long time to answer this from like a society point of view. But I can tell you from a business point of view that what happens is these big companies, what they can do is they can eat the cost of developing a game for 5 years, whereas an indie cannot, right? So maybe you will have a runaway hit, which is like heavily narrative based, which is a smaller game. But a lot of people who are experienced in the gaming industry will not even attempt it because it's really toxic and difficult to do that, to pull that off, right? Games like The Witcher, like look at Cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk came out after 7 years of development and it was completely demolished. Why? Because in that particular instance, the people who wanted the game to come out when it wasn't ready were the stakeholders, the money guys. So they were like, the game needs to come out. And the devs were like, we need another year. Like, when we polish, it's going to be amazing. So they pushed it out. It was a massive shit show because it didn't work on consoles. It didn't optimize well. You couldn't get the textures right. All of that stuff was stuff that was supposed to be done by the QA team, the QC team. So now, after 3 years, Phantom Liberty comes out. The game is redeemed. It took 9 years. How can you employ 500 people for 9 years? So, yeah.
Then I guess it could be partially because of software limitations, because back when software was simpler and then the development time for games was shorter.
I mean, yes, definitely, but also there is a whole slew of narrative games which are actually quite easy to make. So if you go to itch.io, if you go on any of these, or if you use Ink, you can kind of create scripted narrative experience, text-based mostly, but they are there. So some of them are very, very compelling. But I guess the idea is, again, like, where do you make money? Because it is a business, right? So is the development cost worth the risk? Or can you just make another Assassin's Creed game?
I have a question for you. Have you played Stardew Valley?
Stardew Valley? Yes.
Yeah, that's an incredible example of a game made by only one person.
One person,
He made
yes.
everything. Coded, art, music, narrative, everything. It's amazing.
It took like 5-6 years, around 5 to 6 years. And
His wife, girlfriend, was his sugar mama during this time. Before the game.
find the partner who's going to fuel your passion for making games.
I would just like to add that it's also one of the greatest examples of a modding community, because if I'm not mistaken, the code is shared every time he updates, which makes it a lot easier to mod the game, which is also kind of, for instance, when compared to The Sims, which is also heavily modded, it's running into issues because of EA's.
Because it's EA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
How much control should a dungeon master have? For example, the thing where you build a city, you really go into details, and they're just like, no, I don't feel like going there, I want to go to Funzum, for example.
To Walmart. They want to go to Walmart, the place where they can buy all the weapons. Okay, so like, how many hours do you have? We can talk about this later, because like I've been DMing since I was 13. So like I'm massively into this. You can always turn, like, if you're a good dungeon master, first of all, the thing you need to understand is, if the players don't have fun, it's not a good game.
Yeah.
If the players don't have fun, it's not a good game. We can basically transpose that to everything we talked about. However, what a dungeon master is supposed to do, in my humble opinion, is create the atmosphere, create a start point, an end point, and everything in between is modular. So, if you have a message that your characters need to receive from a cool rogue sitting in the corner of the tavern, and they go into the tavern and then get into a fight, have that character meet them while they're running outside. Give them the note through different means. Think on your feet, right? I had one instance where my characters were in a big tower, and they were trying to climb up, and there were these like griffin knights there. And one of them had a note, like a physical note that I wrote and like aged, etc. They decided to not go up. They went into a basement. And I said, like, in the basement, you see a small chest, you try to open it, you succeed. And in that chest is the note that you need for the next beat of the story. And one of my players goes like, man, this guy thought of everything. Like, he put it. I didn't. I just put the next instance of the story in front of the players to make them feel like they succeed. That's it. Okay. Any other questions? I think we're... Do we have another... Is there another lecture coming up after this? Okay, so thank you very much.